What's up, guys? We're about to start our mug on texture. So thinking about adding texture to the surface of our mug. How can we do that? Well, to start, we need to make something to add texture to. So we need to make our slabs that will be our mug body. So our mug body is made up of two parts. The bottom of our mug and then the cylinder shape. Okay, so we're just gonna go start with, on this first project, a really simple basic thing, a cylinder mug form, and then to that we're going to add texture to it. So that can be, we can add texture by stamping, making impressions in it, finding objects with interesting shapes, pushing them into it, cutting away at it, all kinds of things to make interesting textural impressions, cuts, whatever into it. And those are great because I love doing or adding texture to it, because then watching how the glaze responds to that texture is really wonderful. How it pools into the valleys and it breaks on the ridges and it flows over the surface, really enhances the textures that you guys are going to put into this. So find something interesting, think about it before you start. Think about how you might want to add some textures, try some experiments before you get started. Maybe roll out a little slab and try some samples before you get started on this thing, and then you can start to actually get going. So I'm going to show you guys how we make slabs in the classroom and how we might do it at home or at your table or whatever. Lots of different ways to do a thing. So I'm going to roll out some slabs of clay. I'm showing you two different ways. First one is using the slab roller that we have in class, and the other way is doing it by hand, like in some of the videos on the website, throwing it and also using a rolling pin and my water bottle to flatten the clay. Okay, so I've got these two slabs here. I made them in different ways. Part of the convenience of having a ceramic studio to work in is that I can use the slab roller. Super simple. But the at-home stuff are alternate ways to make slabs at home or at your desk or wherever. They're pretty easy, you know. It's not any sort of big deal. You don't need this big stuff. You don't need a rolling pin, but you have to understand the fundamentals of what we're doing, and that is smoothing or thinning this out to our communal clay studio thickness, which is again 1/4 of an inch, and using your pinky finger as a reference point. And then compression is so important. So before I do anything, I compress. I smooth it out, which is again actually compressing is what we're after when we smooth a thing. We might like the smooth surface, or you might like the surface of the texture. So flatten it out and then smooth it out and then roll over it again to get that canvas texture, if that's what you're after. But just understanding some of the basics. Compression is really important in ceramics, as well as in this community environment, having a similar thickness, all the projects. So now I've got my slab here, and now I can start thinking about what's the texture that I want to put on this. So many things you could do. I've always talked about like all the kind of oddball things one could do. Like, I mean, even just simply the bottom of my my water bottle, rolling this around to get round, a bunch of overlapping round shapes on this could be really interesting. Using the corner of this or a piece of wood to get triangles, make those into rows that could start to look like scales or something. But what I've been wanting to do is make something with my shoe print. As I get older, I mean, people like their shoes in general, but as I'm becoming an old man, my shoes just become more and more important. And
So if I don't have a good pair of shoes, my legs get drained, and then my energy goes down, and then my day's ruined. Gosh darn it! So I'm gonna make a mug that pays homage to the fact that I just love having a good pair of shoes. So I'm rocking the Brooks Adrenaline. Woo! Nice ones, huh? So here we go. Kind of roll it around. I don't want to lift it up too much. Oh shoot, I did lift up. Kind of roll it around without lifting up. Roll it around, get a good impression. And then I'm going to roll it forward and lift it up. That's looking pretty nice.
And here's a little extra piece I'm rolling out for the bottom of the mug.
Okay, so I just rolled out a little extra piece. Sometimes I roll this way long, and then I have an extra piece that I can cut off that can be my bottom. I didn't have enough extra, so I had to roll out a little bit more that will be the bottom of my mug. An average mug, here's one right here. An average mug is like 4 inches on the bottoms, 3.5 to 4.5 inches on the bottom by 4 to 5 inches tall is like your average mug. So that's what we're kind of shooting for. So you might want the length of this, the height of it to be 5 to 6 inches tall because clay shrinks as it dries. And you might need it to be 8 to 10 inches long so that it can bend around and become that form that we're looking for. So for right now, I'm going to get a hard surface, so the board that this is going to set on. So I'm going to set my bottom down on the board first. Okay, I'm not going to do anything to it except for I put an impression of the shoe in there. For the body, I'm going to make a flat cut where I want the bottom of the mug to be, where the cylinder is going to stand up on. You'll see in a sec. So I'm going to figure out where I want that line. I'm going to cut it like this. And I'm going to cut, this side's really rough. So I'm going to cut a straight line here, as straight as I can-ish. And then, I guess I'll just cut a little bit right now just to make this easier to handle. I might cut this down a little bit more coming up. But now I've got this kind of shaped roughly how my mug is going to be. But I want to bend this before this clay firms up even a little bit. So I want, while this clay is really soft, I want to pick this up really carefully. And I like to grab both ends. I want my texture to be on the outside. One way to do this is to bend it by hand and get it close to the shape that we want. And then when this firms up, we can further manipulate it. So what I want to happen here is I want this to be basically kind of round. I'm trying not to touch that surface too much and mess it up. So I'm cupping it with my hands really carefully. And that looks good. I'm going to set this carefully on top of the bottom. Really carefully. I'm going to put it a little more centered. Okay, that looks good. And now I've got those two parts. The last part that we need for a mug is a handle, right? So I've got the bottom of the mug, I've got the body of the mug, and now I need a handle. Lots of ways to make a handle. I'll show you one quick way right now. So one quick way that you guys can make a handle is by taking sometimes you can use, if you have long strips of your cutoff, you can use those, or roll out another slab. with a slab of clay, with a nice chunk of a slab, you can get a couple tries out of it. Handles can be a little bit tricky, and we want to get them just to be a little bit wet so that you can bend them really nicely. So I'm going to cut a chunk off here. I usually make handles longer than I need so that I can cut them down to size once they've firmed up a bit. So here's a handle. It's got a pretty good width to it. It's not super small, especially for a mug like this. This is pretty big. So I probably want to have something that's a little bit sturdy. So on a handle like this, I've got these rough cuts, these hard corners right there. That's not going to feel really great when I hold that. So I want to soften those down, and I can do that. I can soften these down while I hydrate it. So one way to do it is with a sponge, a damp sponge. I can start to kind of wipe this down. So by wiping this down a little bit, riding on these corners, rounding those out, softening those corners, I'm also hydrating this slab piece here. So I'm hydrating it as I'm rounding it. You can see the other side has kind of sharp corners there, but this side I've rounded that out. And now I'm going to flip that and do the same over here. So I'm rounding out these cut edges as I'm hydrating it. So hydrating it is nice because then I can bend it into a nice sharp curve. Sometimes still you'll hydrate it and it's still, the clay's brittle or it's too stiff or it's short. It can still break on you, but hydrating it really helps. So now you can see it's really soft. Now I can bend this into the shape that I want pretty easily because I've hydrated it. I've also softened those corners really nicely. So when you bend this, when we get this into shape, we want this to be smaller than the height of the mug. If you bend it in a huge curve that's bigger than your mug, that's just not going to work. So a lot of times what I'll do is just take a simple measurement with my fingers and then check that here. So as long as this is the same size or shorter, it works, and this is good. So I might actually scooch this over a little bit now and carefully pick this up and put this on here as well. It's nice to wrap all these up together as opposed to individually. It's nice to wrap these up together because they'll stay, they'll last longer wrapped up in there. When we wrap these, it'll last longer all together as opposed to if you individually wrap these up. So with a plastic bag, we want to use if you're at home, you can use like a grocery bag or something. So right now, as we're wrapping these up, these are really, really soft. It's too soft for us to really work with. So we need these to stiffen a little bit. So they're on the wooden board. So even when I wrap these up to let them set overnight or for a couple days, the wooden board will slowly be sucking the moisture out of these, stiffening them, firming them up. But the bag is not going to allow them to dry out completely, and them all being together will allow them to last longer. Okay, if we left them on this wooden board for like a week, you might run the risk of them being totally dried out. So the wooden board is nice to help us in the beginning stage suck some of the moisture out while we wait for these to firm up a little bit. So I'm going to take this plastic bag, wrap this around really tight. I want to kind of deflate as much of the air out of there as possible. Kind of tucking that in. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll pick this up and I'll tuck the bag under so it doesn't accidentally blow off or whatever, and just wrap that up really well. Okay, and there we have it. There we have the parts for our textured mug. There's no wrong way to texture this thing. Add some impressions, some indents, some stamps, some interesting marks, whatever you want. And just have fun with it and let's see what you guys come up with. We've got it wrapped up, ready to go, ready to start firming up. It'll take a day or so, or 2 or 3 sometimes, for this to firm up to leather hard so that we can start to assemble this pot. So I've got all the pieces that I need. I've added my texture. I've got this wrapped up really nice. And now we wait. Great job, everybody. Can't wait to see what you did.